The NBA regular season is nearing its conclusion, which means awards talk is all the rage and is only going to increase in the weeks ahead. Now, here at Chucking Darts, we like to be ahead of the curve, which means we are going to talk about the award that really matters, the award that is only growing in importance. I speak, of course, of most improved player. Welcome to Chucking Darts, a podcast of informed, rigorous, reckless, harmless, speculative, and fun predictions about the game we love. And you can call me Chuck. This is episode, I believe, 197. Episode 196 was
Oh
a
yeah.
couple weeks back. It was a draft episode with Maxwell Baumbach of No Ceilings about Dalton Connect, the Tennessee wing, who is a finalist for National Player of the Year, one of the very most offensively talented players in college basketball. But someone who's turning 23 this spring, and it was all about his NBA projection, how aggressive you should draft him, and sort of what wing groups to compare him to help project his future in the league. Very fun episode. Maxwell's great. I just guested on his podcast over the
Hell yeah.
weekend. So check that out as well. But we're going back to the NBA, back to one of my favorite guests, Esfandiar Baraheni, who came on preseason and talked about Scotty Barnes of his beloved Toronto Raptors and a possible leap that was forthcoming in year three. If I may be so humble, I feel like we were on
We
the front end of that wave.
think so. Yeah.
And we discussed most improved player and some candidates therein. And he just came out with what I thought was an excellent article, a very forward thinking article about ways in which to rethink how we define most improved. So we will get to that. But before, S, how are you?
I'm good. Incredibly well. Thank you very much for having me. You can't smell me from there, but I smell like firewood. I just came back from like a campfire type of thing, and that's all I can smell right now, man. I didn't know I smelt like this, and now sitting here doing the podcast, it's all I smell. I'm good though. I'm good. Appreciate you having me
Well,
on.
if anyone were to come on the show who I would immediately associate with sort of sparkling, crackling, smoky analysis, it would be
Thank you.
US. So
Appreciate it,
I'm
man. Thank
glad
you.
that you've just leaned all the way in.
Yeah. Hey, can I just on your draft note? This
Mhm.
is like talking about the previous episode that you just did. I find it so fascinating because I love watching players as soon as they enter the league. I will digest all of the draft conversation once they get drafted, go
Mhm.
back and look at the college tape and whatnot. But I don't really engage in it throughout the process, as you guys are midway through the season, wait until the tournament, whatnot. I don't engage in it for some reason. And it's always funny to me because I love listening to other opinions about the draft. Guys, scouts, draft people in general just talk about these guys. And then once they come into the NBA, it's like these are let me take care of the baby. You know what I mean? Let me. And so I feel like a sense of like I don't know. It's like a transfer of ownership for some of these like younger players that come into the league because now I love tracking their progress. And I think I mentioned this in the last episode. It's just like it's one of the most fascinating parts of basketball and the NBA for me is like tracking these guys' growth and where they're able to kind of take their skill set, which is what we're going to talk about, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, if only all media treated them as babies to nurture, that'd be great. I think we'd be
Yeah,
in a much healthier place,
for
at
sure.
large, if that's how young players were treated. Not always treated that way. The discourse
No.
around them can be a little bit more coarse,
Yeah.
and so what's funny about that though is that like so for example, Toronto rookie Grady Dick, who's really shown out the last several weeks, and your coverage of him is excellent.
Thank you.
Um, like that's a one and done freshman, right? And so one and
Right.
done freshmen really are babies. The good thing,
Yeah.
the interesting thing about Dalton, not to go on too much of a tangent, is that he has
He's
taken
older,
like
right? Yeah.
older, taken a very sort of circuitous route. This is his first season at high major college basketball, but because of that, he's a very polished scorer. So if you watch a college game, it's not like you're seeing a precocious, like really young player who's trying to find their game,
Right.
amidst older teammates. It's like you're watching like a killer. Like this
Right.
guy is like going for throats the
Like he
whole
knows
game.
what he's getting to every single time down the floor. Right. He's
Exactly.
operating at a higher level than these guys. I got you.
And it just sort of, I imagine that's what it was like, if you were scouting 20, 30 years ago before the one and done crate, where like it was so common to stay in college for 2 or 3 or 4 years, where guys had a lot more personal
Right.
ownership and like just sort of a lot more self-possession of their games in college. It's like there's something very fun about it because you definitely see like their personalities come out. You see what they've worked on. You see, it's cool to watch a guy like Dalton, even if opinions diverge on him. It's like a very fun
Sure.
scout as opposed to one and done guys who are always there's going to be like lots of highs and lows as
Right.
they sort of figure out who they are.
Yeah. Yeah, the multi-year guys are interesting cuz like also I think the way people approach those types of players has changed a little bit. For a very long time it was, "Oh, you draft a multi-year player. Yes, they're more polished, but also there's less untapped potential, there's less
Mm-hmm.
ceiling talk." I feel like that's changed a little bit over the last couple of years where people don't necessarily immediately assume that a player who's played for 2 or 3 years is just a finished product. Like there's more potential to be had there. I can't remember who I'm specifically thinking of, but there
Jalen
was
Williams, maybe Keegan
maybe
Murray.
Jalen Williams. Yeah, Keegan Murray and Jalen Williams are good examples of that, though.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I don't know, it maybe that has changed in your world as well. I'm not sure though.
I think it's mainly just because as the league has gotten more talented, there's less of a guarantee that if you like leave one and done that you're going to get time.
Sure.
10, 15 years ago, if you were like talented, a team could take you and throw you out there and you could like just sort of be there for 2 seasons and have like job security because you were a draft pick and that was how long your runway is. Runway's
Right.
not as long now. You have to help a team a lot more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, guys are starting to wait a little bit more until they're really ready to help an NBA team. And so I think that's why you see a few more guys stick around. That plus NIL obviously is a big
True.
factor in it as well, making it a more attractive option. So
Yeah.
I don't mind it as long as guys are doing the right thing for their future. I'll scout whoever's there. I'll have a good time doing it. But yeah, I
Awesome.
think
Yeah.
those are two big reasons.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fascinated to see how these pipelines kind of adapt and evolve because there's sort of a conversation about the G League Ignite and
Mm-hmm.
what the future of that holds. Plus, the NIL deals are sort of changing college ball and the landscape, like you mentioned. I don't know. I'm just kind of fascinated to see how that shakes out over the next decade. With
Yeah, I mean, Dartmouth just unionized and that hasn't gotten like hadn't gotten struck down yet, and who
Mhm.
knows what that means. I mean, there's
Yeah.
lots of different permutations of it, but as long as there are darts, I'll be chucking them, man. That's
Hell
that's,
yeah.
that's how it goes.
Yep.
Um, but this article that you wrote for Forbes,
Yeah.
which by the way, you have somewhat of like a partnership with. You've written multiple things for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You decided to approach a most improved player like you would an all NBA
Yeah.
conversation, where you decided to do 3 teams of all most improved, which I love. Number
Yeah.
one, because it's just more fun to give shine to more guys who really are working on their games and improving.
Yeah.
Number two, improvement is such a crucial concept in the league that I don't believe gets covered in the depth that it should, because the reason teams win is not
Because these
because
guys get better. Yeah.
that's exactly right. It
Yeah.
very frequently is not because some superstar parachutes into town and delivers them a title.
Right.
If it's LeBron James in his prime, he can do that. But the over the course of NBA history, it's putting in the work year after year and growing
Yeah.
together year after year, and the sort of improvements, not just of stars, but of other guys within a core, can make a massive, massive difference. And
Yeah.
so that I think demands a more wide ranging perspective on improvement in the league year to year. And not only is this article indicative of how much of like a burgeoning expert you are in the space, but you did a Leap series podcast series over the summer talking about guys who are going to improve. I mean, you really are the connoisseur in the area. So why
I
don't you
love this
talk?
type of I just
Go.
I like I love this type of conversation, Chuck. Like it just it's what I enjoy, and it kind of relates back to the draft stuff that we were talking about before, cuz like as soon as they get into the league, it's like I am there to watch and see how they can evolve and get to whatever the next step is, cuz I never know, but these guys sort of chart out their own path, and that's the thing that's fascinating to me, to see how they kind of they're like it's like a pinball machine, right? You kind of let it fly once they get into the NBA, and they kind of bounce around in multiple different areas, and then they land where they're supposed to land. And that's what's fascinating to me about Most Improved, or how we talk about it. But I should preface this, because the article, like, if you look at the betting odds and the way people are talking about Most Improved regularly, they're going to bring up Tyrese Maxey, who is a guy who is the favorite to win Most Improved right now. And they will bring up maybe even a guy like, I don't know, I'm not sure who else is on the betting list. I know Tyrese Maxey is the favorite right now. That being said,
Mentioned in our preseason episode as one of the
yeah,
one of the guys to really watch. I just had to,
yeah. Hey, give yourself some love. It's all good. But I didn't include any first time All Star
right
into my all improved teams, just because, to your first point, I wanted to give love to guys who weren't getting the love necessary already. And also I just wanted to make it, kind of, he is going to win the award. Let's talk about these other guys that might just, you know what I mean? Show love to some of the other players that just aren't going to be mentioned. So again, first time All-Stars, no Scotty Barnes, no Jalen Brunson, no Paolo Banchero, no Tyrese Maxey. They were not included. Although, they took their respective leaps, obviously, to become All-Stars this year. So I don't want to take anything away from them. I wanted to more so just shed light on some of these other guys who likely will not get the love they deserve for becoming improved players this year.
And we covered this when you came on to talk Most Improved preseason, but first-time All-Stars overwhelmingly win the award. You made that point in your article. So if you're trying to identify who that's going to be at any point in the given season, that's where you start, is who's going to make the All-Star game for the first time. The reason Maxey is the favorite is because he's a first-time All-Star on a winning team, unlike Scotty Barnes. Jalen Brunson's also on a winning team, but he was the best player on a playoff team last year, so he doesn't quite have the narrative juice to do it. And Paolo is on a winning team, but he's a second-year player, and there's a bias against second-year players in this discussion, which, as I pointed out on our preseason episode, I find absolutely ridiculous, because I think that improvement should be expected every year you're in the NBA. And for whatever reason, second-year guys are just thought of as like, well, we can't reward that improvement. Why would we do that? I think that's silly, but that is how it is. And that's why out of that crew, Maxey on a winning team, contender, first-time All-Star, clearly important to his team, might make an All-NBA team this year. He doesn't have any sort of narrative, I guess,
bias, if you will,
right? That would bring him down a little bit. So with that preface, let's get to your teams. Let's start wherever you'd like to. You want to start with your first team or your third team?
Sure, let's start first. Let's give love to the top. Why not? The first, I don't know. Do you want to announce them? I can.
Sure. I'll announce them. You have Coby White, point guard for the Bulls, Jalen Johnson, wing on the Atlanta Hawks, Alperen Sengun, center on the Houston Rockets, Jalen Williams, wing on the Oklahoma City Thunder, and Jonathan Kuminga, wing on the Golden State Warriors. So wherever you would like to start with those five, please go ahead.
If we want to go with what my preference is for what a most improved player looks like, I would probably lean towards Coby White winning the entire award.
I love it.
I love Maxey, and I think the improvement was there, but for me, I think he took his leap last year. He's being given the extra usage, the extra touches, no Harden, obviously. to really just let go of the leash and just kind of let it fly, right? So the opportunity is clearly there. That's not to say the opportunity isn't there for Coby White right now. Obviously, no Levine. He's been thrust into a bigger role. He's now the starting point guard for this team. I remember very early on into the season, Billy Donovan made it established that he was going to be the starting point guard moving forward. And with that confidence, he is really coming to his own as a lead guard. Obviously, the improvements as a shooter is incredible. He's shooting pretty much 40% from three this year. And I think, doing it on really, really high volume. The playmaking is popping off of the chart. His ability to get downhill, engage the help, find guys, that type of stuff is really important as a lead guard for a team. And yeah, the Bulls are just stuck in this mediocre treadmill type of thing, but they would be much worse without Coby White, who I think has been really important to what they do offensively. So Coby, man, like he's going from being a reserve slash role player to a starting guard. And I think he will pretty confidently stay a starting guard in this league if all of this sustains moving forward.
Yeah, I think he absolutely is a starting guard in the league, from this point forward. And Coby, his handle is excellent, and the way that he uses it sort of translates against any competition. And this is sort of the point I want to start making as we go through these players is there's tons of different ways to improve. One of the ways to improve is to, like you mentioned with Maxey, is to get more usage, even if as a player you already like were at a certain level and maybe were not just trusted as much by your team.
Yeah.
The team decides to give you that trust, then your talent comes out, and that is improvement, but it's maybe not the same as adding a bunch of stuff to your bag or showing stuff that like really no one had seen before. I think with Coby, there's like a healthy mix of like
Yeah.
his shooting splits are basically the same as they were last year, but the shot difficulty is way up, the shot volume is way up, the defensive attention tilted towards him is way up. And so he's had to problem solve a lot. And it's not as though the Bulls are like the best space team in the world either. So
Yeah.
he's had to sort of overcome a very sort of chaotic context around him. And he's had to alternate with DeMar DeRozan, who is, a great player, but subtly sort of a hard player to necessarily play off of because
Mm-hmm.
he's sort of an arrhythmic inside the arc kind of guy. He's not the most natural guy to play off of an initiator like Coby. And
Yeah.
they've had to negotiate that. Now, since Coby really became a high minute guy, and I think he and DeMar are the top two players in the whole league in minutes. Um,
That's actually pretty nuts.
since his minutes really stepped up with coincided with Levine's injury and Levine taking a back seat, the
Yeah.
Bulls are I think 26-20. So now we're talking over half the season that they've been, like a very like a solid team. They still
Yeah.
are, not a contender and they still are sort of on the treadmill, but maybe they've moved the treadmill on sort of an upward incline and are still
Sure.
maintaining their splits. And you can just see, especially at the end of games and fourth quarters, the Bulls have played in a ton of tight games, that Coby's talent, his bag, uh, like it's there. There's no like taking it away when a defense decides to take it away. He can
Right.
hit threes off the dribble to either side. He can set up defenders, get into the lane, and sort of finish despite what defensive attention's in front of him. He has a great sense of when to get off the ball and when to relocate. He can play off the ball. Like he has got the goods. What I want to ask you is, do you believe that Coby has a ceiling now of being a very good starting point guard for a contender, for a very good team, if the right talent is around him?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, ceiling is such a hard word to use because who knows? Maybe this is the step before the step type of thing where, you know, let's say he ends up becoming an incredible finisher at the rim. Well, he is still a pretty good finisher at the rim, but like becomes an incredible finisher at the rim. Let's say his playmaking takes another step forward. There are different avenues where he could become even better than he is today. But I think in terms of the context and the type of player that he is, you mentioned so much the ability to play on ball and off of the ball. I think that's super important for whenever he ends up on a really good team, he'll be able to fill into a role, whatever that might be. I think now, let's say he ends up on a really, really good contender. I could see him as a sixth man coming off of the bench, change of pace guard for you that can really, really maybe, I guess, change the complexion of a game or be the starting point guard. It just depends what the context is around him. But like, you couldn't say that about him last year. I don't think you could. Maybe towards the second half of the season, you saw those incremental improvements. The shooting was better. He was getting more opportunities on the ball, but for the most part, I don't think people envision Coby White becoming a legitimate starting point guard in this league moving forward. And I I think there's a confidence level that he probably has in himself and on his shot. Like the shooting has just been absolutely ridiculous this season that I think we'll be able to sustain moving forward. The other thing is defensively, not the greatest yet. Like he still gets hunted a little bit, on switches. Like guys are constantly like, if there is a pick and roll that they're running, a team's running, especially in the fourth quarter, they're going to try to hunt Coby, post up with like a Kawhi or a PG who can just kind of take advantage of that type of situation. That's something he'll have to figure out. But again, this is a good start to what he can be as a player, especially like a really, really good player in this league.
Yeah, and without going into like full-fledged Coby scouting report, I don't think, Coby has a negative wingspan, or he certainly didn't have a plus wingspan, but he is like 6'4", 6'5".
Yeah.
So I think you have a little bit to work with defensively. And I believe that his offensive talent is such, like his creativity in scoring is such that I could see him, to, I guess, answer the question I posed to you. Like my opinion on it is
Yeah.
that he could be the starting point guard on like an excellent, like top 4 seed level team. That's And maybe that isn't as a top 2 offensive option. Maybe there are two, players who are even more nuclear than he is to make a team
Mm-hmm.
that good. But Kobe's on an excellent contract, at least for now, a very team friendly deal. And I think he his creativity, his shot making is something that could play in very, very high leverage moments. Like that's more what I
Swap
what
him,
would go ahead.
swap him and Mike Conley on the Timberwolves. Are the Timberwolves still as good, just as good? I think I would say yes.
I think
I'm
they're
not.
better.
Yeah, they. I mean, offensively, they would very much so be better.
Yeah, I think yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I
yeah.
yeah, I agree with you.
So,
I agree with you. You gave me a thought bubble there. It was like, huh, okay, if you were to place him in a top 4 team right now,
mhm.
how would that look? Yeah, I agree with you. I think he would be a starting point guard on a really, really good team. Just depends on the context around him. Like Chicago, I mean, we don't need to keep going in on Chicago, but like they're not the best context of a team right now.
Dude, there's part of me that like I need a play-in game, like a play-in elimination game that's them and the Magic as like the Vooch Franz trade revisited, and can the Bulls for like another year claim like non-disaster.
Oh
But
my god. Vooch
but
hits like 5 threes in that game. Why
yeah,
not?
hang the banner, baby. All right, let's move on. Let's talk the wings, Jalen Johnson, Jalen Williams, and John Kuminga. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, with Jalen Johnson, I mean, but honestly, with all of these guys, and to your point earlier about opportunity, like, don't get me wrong, these guys did get more opportunity this season. Jonathan
Mhm.
Kuminga had to fight for a starting spot this year with Steve Kerr. Like, there are levels of just being trusted and getting more opportunity and getting more touches to the whole most improved conversation that exists. It's just there's a balance to tangibly improving on certain skills versus just being given the usage, which I think is an important discussion to have when it comes to most improved. These guys, Jalen Johnson, for the most part, it has just been like a Swiss Army knife that has made the Hawks sort of question where they're going. Like they're like, oh, this guy is so good that we might have to reevaluate what our team looks like moving forward. And that
Mhm.
is a rare quality to have as a player. He is this rangy defender who can do a lot of great stuff on the weak side, a point forward who's a killer in transition, who can make plays for others, who is improving as a shooter. I wouldn't say he's great by any means, but he's improving to the point where he can stay on the floor for longer. And that sort of applies to John. I mean, like, these guys are doubling down on certain qualities that they had originally,
Yes.
and that
Yes.
is what they're leaning on. That applies heavily to Jonathan Kuminga, who's like, I am going to be a human battering ram. I am going to dive to the basket every chance I get, score around the rim every single opportunity I get. And the Warriors system allows him to do that so often because much of the attention goes to Steph and Clay and whatnot. So I think that that's the biggest thing for me is these guys are like leveraging their strengths to double down on that. And with JDub, who is like one of my favorite players to watch, honestly, I adore watching JDub because I did not see the playmaking becoming this good this early. Mark Dagnall has pretty much trusted him to be the lead ball handler for their bench units over Josh Giddey. And there's a whole conversation around Giddey and like his deficiencies as a player and whatnot. But I think that's an excellent idea for him moving forward as this sort of point forward. And him and Chet in these bench units are just feasting on competition. He's getting to his shots easily. He's making plays for others. I think that's the biggest step he's taken to become an even more efficient player. So those guys, they're just doubling down on things that they were already good at, and it's turning them into like very very good, potentially future all-star level players.
Yeah. So I did an episode on Kuminga with Charlie Cummings about a month or so ago, maybe in
My dad.
January. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Claytheist, man. He's the
Yes,
best.
sir.
So
Yeah.
we were talking about him in the midst of his breakout, how it happened, how it sort of changed the Warriors' fortunes a little bit, how it sort of what mandate it gives them as an organization about how they're going to build their team out moving forward. Like it is a huge deal. Like I'm not going to restate everything that was said in that episode, but they're going to have a financial decision to make
Big
on
time. Yeah.
him this summer amidst all of their other stuff. And in my opinion, if they're smart, they're going to make some other people take a back seat who may not think that they need to. But like Kuminga, that driving game is exactly right. He's another guy who has sort of maintained at the same level of efficiency with drastically increasing his volume because he's one of the most destructive drivers in the league.
Yeah.
Um, JDub, I love to see what he's done. He's a guy who I actually wrote about last summer as someone who I thought like was being severely underrated after his rookie year. The stuff that he did, like his touch from two, his rookie year, I think he shot 58% on twos
Yeah, his
on
mid
like
range is incredible. Yeah.
8 shots a game
He
from
pretty
two.
much just doesn't miss when he goes left. Like when he goes left, pull up left just does not miss at all. Like it's incredible to watch.
And wings with his length, like guys with 7'2" wingspans just don't have that level of touch. You just don't see it coming through the draft. You'll see guys who are that long, but almost universally the question with them is always the jumper because it's so hard to be that advanced.
Yeah.
But he's got it. And it was something that I thought in looking at him after his rookie season that is just, even though he's not a blow by kind of player, he's a bit more, give you a shoulder bump or, drive on a closeout and just sort of get to your spot kind of guy. It's just something that I thought it was sort of like more or less unguardable with his length and
Yeah.
his strength. And he's someone who I could see making all-star or all NBA teams, not unlike how Jalen Brown has as a running mate for like a perennial 50, 55 win team, except I actually think he's going to be a better player than Jalen Brown. So, I
Yeah,
mean,
I would agree with that. I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I don't know if you had
so
more.
but
Yeah.
I think in context of this conversation, if we were to talk about most improved, I mean, he's a second year player, so he has that bias. But if you want to define most improved as the player whose improvement means the most,
Hmm.
then you could argue that it's him, because you could argue that out of everyone that we're going to talk about in this episode, including Maxey, Jalen's going to end up being the best player,
Yeah.
and that getting basically more or less to the level. I mean, he's a huge contributor to a 50-win team right now. That's the most meaningful improvement on the board. But maybe he wins this award next year or something like that. And
Right.
it's just sort of a year after
Yeah,
we
it's
might give it to
funny.
him.
It's funny how that shit works. I'm sorry, but like it's just funny because like it will end up that way. He'll be the betting favorite or something, and he'll get the numbers for it. He'll get the All Star nod, and he'll finally win Most Improved. Where really like the improvement. I mean, the yes, he could probably improve. This is the thing that really annoys me about Most
Go
Improved is
for it,
that
man.
and
Go
that's
off.
why a team that's why teams would be much better for this. I'm not asking for three. Maybe I went overboard with three all improved teams. You could probably narrow it down to two, but by
You
adding
could
an
do
all
four.
improved, you
Yeah.
could do five if you want to. But if you do all improved teams, you're giving love to some of these guys who actually year by year are getting better. I agree with you on everything you said about JDub. I think he's a star in the making. I would agree on the Jalen Brown take. I think there's just more probably versatility to the way that he can get to his buckets, self-created and not self-created, that I think early Jalen Brown didn't have. And
Mhm.
while he's like grown into it, I think there's a pretty legitimate chance for him to be a perennial all-star. Just depends on how things shake out with the West, because that's going to be the tough thing. Like there's so much competition in the West when it comes to those slots. You know.
There is, but again, I don't mean like this is. I really don't mean to sound like I'm disparaging Jalen Brown, because he's an excellent player.
Of course, yeah.
Might win an NBA title this year, but Jalen, like right now, not comparing them at the same age, is a better dribbler, a better passer, and a better shooter than Jalen Brown, in my
Agreed.
opinion. And
I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah.
if you're better at all three of those things, then like guess what? Like you, it's that's basically it. So
Yeah.
I just think whatever. I've said my piece on him.
Yeah.
But he is
We're both high on him.
very,
That's what I think. We're
very.
coming to the conclusion that he's like he can be a very. It's funny looking at this OKC team, and I think you had a point earlier about just like guys who improve every single year, and they might not be what they were 4 years ago. Like Shea is a great example of this.
Mhm.
Kind of climb from like a top 50 player to top 25 to top 20 to top 15, and now many people will put him in like the top 5 in the league. I just think you can't track that type of progression over one single season. You have to sort of look at it incrementally, and that's why almost improved teams should exist. That's
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 you're
my case
exactly
for it.
right.
But
You're
yes,
exactly
anyways,
right.
yeah.
You want to hit on Sengun real quick before we moved on to
Yeah, I mean,
second team?
tough injury there, obviously.
Hmm.
Luckily that he didn't, it wasn't anything too severe, hopefully, based on the reports at least. I mean, I think for the most part my biggest takeaway with Sengun is that he's become more aware as a defender, and that has made it much harder to take him off of the floor when there are moments where you need him on the floor. Last year, even the year beforehand, it was like some of the defensive mistakes, some of and they still exist. Like there are still moments where he has those defensive mishaps, but they are less. And so it is becoming easier to put him on the floor and keep him on the floor. And the unorthodox way that he gets to his shots, the playmaking craft that he has, the little push shot, all of that has become so much more efficient. I think that's what makes me just, He's become a better, more holistic player. Also, I think putting better players around him has helped his game blossom, and I think that's an underrated aspect of improvement too. It's like finding the dudes around you who or the around your prospect that can help them enable certain parts of their game. So I think Fred VanVleet, the pick and roll stuff that they do has really enabled him to become a better play finisher. And, some of the defensive stuff that Fred and Dylan Brooks do at the point of attack allows Sengun to be insulated a little bit more on the defensive end. And so it's like finding things, and, Pistons fans will know this very well, finding things that can make Cade Cunningham the type of player you hope he can one day be. You got to do the same with Sengun, and I think that's happened this season. That's why you're seeing the improvement.
Yeah, I think Sengun, we talked about him in that preseason episode as a candidate for this award.
Yeah.
I love what you said. I think especially the point of attack stuff with Dylan and Fred, and not just the two of them, but like Amen Thompson being
Big
in
time,
that
yeah.
program now, Jabari being able to help on the weak side. Tari Eason, unfortunately, has been banged up most of the year, but like he has so much defensive personnel
Yeah.
to help him that trying to target him on defense is sort of like fool's gold, in my opinion. Not unlike how James Harden was targeted on switches for so many years in a way that was counterproductive to the team targeting him. Because
Right.
in order to get to Sengun the most, you're either going to try to isolate him on a switch, and that can waste a lot of time on a possession if the point of attack guy isn't giving any ground, and it will lead to a lot of players on your offense standing around. And if Sengun is engaged in sort of a short area matchup, whether that's in pick and roll or whether that's on a drive, like Jokic, though not to Jokic's extent, um, he has great hand placement, great anticipation. So even if the physical explosion is not there, or like the length isn't there to erase mistakes, if you show him the ball like within his arm's reach, he's going to get his hands on it. I think there was a
Yeah.
stat that since the All-Star break, pre-injury, I think he led the NBA in steals, something
Yeah.
like that. And that just goes to show, like, he's an incredibly high field guy. And when he won MVP of the Turkish league when he was 18 years old, a grown man league, it was the same thing. He created so many deflections, so much more than you think he would. And it's just those kinds of guys, those kind of centers who see the whole game and understand the whole game and where the ball's supposed to go and where it's going to be. They will be deceptively like average defenders or deceptively above average. And Sengun, I mean, we're talking about a guy that turns 22 this summer. And that's
Yeah.
how young he is. Like I stand obviously by what I said about Jalen about being the best player on this list, but no offense revolves around a single player on this list the way it revolves around Sengun. He will have the most offensive responsibility, the most usage likely of anyone on this list. And
Absolutely.
if he reaches his ceiling in doing so with a lot of defensive talent around him, then you never know. It's a whole other question about how far a player like Sengun can take you if he's not, 7 foot with a 7'3" wingspan, the way that Jokic is, but I'd be
Right.
hesitant to put a ceiling on him.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that type of offensive player is rare, and that type of feel is also rare. Like you can't teach that level of feel,
Mhm.
and it comes innate to some players. I know that very well from watching Scotty Barnes. It's like he has a level of feel when it comes to the playmaking aspect that you can't teach to certain guys. And that like that changes things for the way we project these players. And so yeah, I agree with you, man. Alpi, hopefully fully healthy season next year, because yeah, that injury looked tough. But yeah.
Yeah, thankful that it didn't, like, nothing came up as torn or anything. So
Yes.
like right
Right.
now, diagnosis just like bruises. I'm sure he's done for the year, but
Yeah.
glad that he escaped anything worse. All right, second team. What we've got here is Jalen Suggs, Orlando Magic, Derrick White, Boston Celtics, Colin Sexton, Utah Jazz, like that one. Herb Jones, New Orleans Pelicans, and Deni Avdia, Washington Wizards. So
Yes.
Suggs, White, Herb, and Deni, but especially Suggs, White, and Herb are a similar archetype of player,
Sure.
to use an overused term, which is to say that they all sort of they cut their teeth in the league first on defense, gaining a reputation as guys with great, dribble containment, really good point of attack defenders. And each of them have gradually added to their offensive games.
Yeah.
So, which out of these three do you believe has had the most drastic improvement this year? The most meaningful improvement.
Ooh, that's a tough question. So I think I would probably lean towards Jalen Suggs. And by the way, all three of those guys are probably going to make all defense teams. If I would imagine so. Like now that I just kind of jumping out of it, I think Derrick White, Suggs, and Herb are, I don't want to say locks, but they're up there in terms of the conversation for all defense teams. So their defense is carrying them, but like you said, the offensive aspect is something that's evolving. And the reason I say Suggs is because the 3-point shooting is genuinely baffling how good he's become this season compared to his first 2 seasons in the league. He shot 29% through his first 2 years in the league. Now he's shooting basically 40% from three on the same volume that he took in his first 2 years. That being said, he was injured. He was kind of like a bone bruise here, a thumb issue here in his first couple of years. He has had injuries here and there this season, but it's been a more healthy year. He's been able to shoot a little bit more off of the catch when it comes to Paolo Banchero creating an advantage for him or Franz Wagner creating an advantage for him. That's worked out really well for his offensive game. And I think the transition opportunities that he provides for this team based off of the defense, like turning defense into offense, is such an underrated skill for a team that is not necessarily the best at their half court sets.
Mm-hmm.
So getting out in the break and getting out in transition is super important. And the way that he does that, just like shoots out of a cannon for a steal, then is able to just like go up for a layup. Like that's something that is obviously his athleticism, his ability to track the ball, the off ball awareness to like telegraph where a ball is going and get that deflection or that steal. I highly recommend, if anybody doesn't, by the way, like when you're watching an Orlando Magic game and they're on defense, just watch Jalen Suggs. Like he's a ball hawk. He's bouncing on the balls of his feet. He's waiting to pounce either way. It kind of feels like a goalkeeper, waiting for a penalty shot. You know how they do the little bounce for
Sure.
in
Yeah.
soccer, and then they gotta leap one way or another. Suggs
Thank,
does
thank
that
you
on
for dumbing it
defense.
down and calling it soccer for me. I appreciated this.
Voir dire, I got you.
Oh man, what a reference to an off mic conversation.
Yes,
Shouts,
yes,
shouts to your mise en scène, to use
yes.
another term. Yeah, go
There you
ahead,
go.
go ahead.
But yeah, I think the offensive improvement is from Suggs. You could argue Herb though, because again, his 3-point leap this season has opened up a lot of things for him, and Derrick White in his own right has become a really important part for one of the best teams in the league. So you can argue for either or. I have a soft spot for Jalen Suggs, and yes, it's clearly showing in this conversation.
As do I. In fact, if I were to create my own teams here, I would probably replace Kuminga with Suggs on the
I like it.
first team, and I will
I
tell
like it.
you why. Um, Number one, Jalen Suggs was not guaranteed like a starting spot either, in the same way Kuminga was not at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
But there was not such veteran entrenchment in Orlando as there was in Golden State. So it's almost as though Suggs's stock was a little bit lower even than Kuminga's, because one's a guard, one's a wing, blah, 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 blah. We don't need to get it all the way into that. But I think that when you look at the player each has become, Kuminga relies on having the ball in his hands to score. His improvement is get me the ball, I will score for you. Kuminga also has a lot of defensive utility, but it's more like to reap the benefits of the improvement, you have to give him a lot of shots. And
Right.
I think there is a valid conversation to have about whether a high usage Kuminga is a top two option that you can win playoff series with because his playmaking is still so, in its infancy still. I mean, he
Right.
still doesn't really pass out of drives.
Yeah.
So Suggs, by contrast, and Suggs, White, and Herb, all three, this applies to all three because the Celtics might be the title favorite. They're certainly the favorite in the East. The Magic are like 13-4 in their last 17. And the Pelicans, who no one seems to want to talk about except for me all the time, are also about 13 games over 500 in the West. They just keep winning, even though lots of
13 games?
I
Really?
believe they're 38-25. I could be wrong, but I thought that's what they.
39 and 25 now. So wow, damn.
So this kind of player, this sort of point of attack hawk who can really switch, who can operate pick and roll in a pinch, who can play off the ball, I think will become to be sought after increasingly in the future and thought of as a prerequisite if you really want to win, if you
Yeah.
want to go deep, you got to have one of these guys. And I
Yeah.
think like Denver is formulated differently because Jokic is so unique. Like they can win different ways. But even on that team, like Kentavious is sort of that guy. They just don't need Kentavious to run pick and roll because they have Jokic to
Right.
do all that stuff.
Right.
But in absence of having an offensive star that brilliant, I think you just kind of need these guys because you're going to play such great on-ball players that you need someone to try to bother them, to try to bring their efficiency down just an iota so that your offense can prevail on the other end. And so I view Suggs's role as potentially more translatable to deep playoff success than I would Jonathan's. And I think in comparison to Derrick and Herb, Herb, we've seen glimpses of him being this good. I mean, there's a reason the Pels without Zion made the playoffs and made a little noise with Herb contributing as a rookie two
Yeah.
years ago in that series against the Suns. But it's good that his shooting improvements seem like very permanent. And Derrick, was a key contributor on their team last year that made a deep run. So that's why Jalen really pops to
Yeah.
me. And on the shooting question, I got to shout out my guy Mike Gribanoff, one of the very smartest minds who covers the draft. He loves Suggs, and one of the things that he brought up in Suggs's draft year is that Suggs shot about I think 33% from three, 34% from three at Gonzaga, but he would take deep ones. Like he would pull up from deep and shoot with confidence.
Right.
And that can translate. You can understand why that would translate to the NBA in a deeper line for
Yeah.
obvious reasons. But he is also such a strong guy and has such unbelievable core strength that I think that's an underrated thing about shooting projection as well. If you're willing to shoot and you are just a tippy top guard athlete, I think your shot can come along more quickly than it seems. And I think
Mhm.
that's something that is working in Suggs' favor too. So I just wanted to say those couple of things.
That's
Um,
fascinating.
yeah.
I didn't even consider that, but that's really fascinating. That's awesome.
So let's talk Deni and Sexton. Who do you want to hit first?
I think with Sexton, I'll just bring it up real quick. It's similar to Coby White, but probably to a lesser degree in the sense that he is being given more of a role in
Mhm.
Utah, more confidence to be that guy, and I think he's being empowered more often to be a playmaker. Like Coby, Coby has had good shooting seasons in the past, has had good offensive seasons in the past, but now it feels like there's just more a well-roundedness to Sexton's game, especially as a playmaker. Like both of these guys have tangibly improved as guys who can engage the help defense, bend the defense to their will, using their scoring, getting downhill, kick out, or either dump off, whatever it is, creating for their teammates. I think to a lesser extent, Colin has done something similar in Utah, and I've really enjoyed the way he's been engaged on the offensive end to create for other guys, which is something that like in Cleveland just wasn't the case. He was very much so an undersized two guard, scoring
Hmm.
guard.
Hmm.
Whereas now you can maybe trust him a little bit more to run your offense, and I think that's the big thing with Colin. With Deni, um, Jalen Johnson esque in the sense that like he's
Yeah.
just become like good at everything, sort of. The 3-point shooting is obviously like a big marker. Like he's become a better 3-point shooter, so he's just been able to stay on the floor more often. But great defensive tools, able to guard multiple positions, can serve as that point forward for you to make plays. I think that's the improvement that I see from him is just like people, the cliche is the game is slowed down for him, but
Hmm.
I think in a lot of ways he's reading the defense better, being able to make those plays more often, and it's just helped him improve his game.
I think if the Wizards, he signed like a super team friendly deal,
Yeah.
extension, and like right before his deadline this offseason. And the Wiz, for whatever, I know they have a new regime now, and I know that, they're the butt of a lot of jokes, and that's fine. But having him under contract for that length of time, like it is a huge, huge asset. And I don't mean an asset in like you could get a lot for him in a trade, though I'm sure that they could. I mean, like in as a team building block, much like these other guys who do it at the guard level, Deni does it at the wing level. Like that is a winning player. That is a player where if you get the right initiators to play with him, like the
Yeah.
right guys who are efficient, know how to share the ball and build like a top half of the league offense, you'll see that turnaround really quickly. Now it's easier said than done. They don't have that guy on the roster yet, but Denny's a winner. He's just a winner who's sort of stuck in a non-winning situation. So, huge shout out to him. And I think there's been a lot written about the relationship between Will Hardy and Colin Sexton, and
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
Will had to sort of disabuse himself of like whatever biases he had of Colin as a player. Because I think there's probably a perception out there that Colin was a selfish player, and I actually think quite the opposite is true. I think he is a whatever it takes to win is what I will do. It's
Yeah.
just when you're a young player and you know how to score, then you're going to try to score because you're young and you're building out your game, and that's what you think the best thing you can do is to help your team win. And
Yeah.
so I thought that was a very inspired choice. Very happy for him.
Yeah, he's a
Yeah.
cool player. He's a very cool player. I'm Utah is in a very fascinating situation with their guys because they obviously have Keontae George and Bryce and like their Taylor Hendricks, and like they're giving these guys opportunity, but they also have this younger core and Walker Kessler and Lowry and Sexton who can like on any given night compete with a really good team. I'm fascinated with how they move forward. I have no idea what they're gonna do, but they're a fun little bunch.
I'm sure at some point they'll, Angel find a star to trade for with his Gobert bounty, and he'll chip some of them off. I mean that's what I like when you have. I like Keontae, Bryce, and Taylor a lot. I liked Bryce and Taylor especially coming out of the draft. I had them both as top 10 level talents, and I had Hendricks as a top 5 talent.
Right.
So I believe very strongly in what they've got, but given that they're going to have like I think probably solid draft picks again in this coming draft, like at some point you just can't develop everyone, and
Yeah.
he'll make a move, and then they'll see if they can level up, which will be exciting. I mean, he
Yeah.
certainly Ainge has done a great job collecting the pieces, and Hardy's a great maestro. So we'll see where it goes. We'll see where
Yeah.
it goes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So third team here, making sure we do not give short shrift to anyone. Oh goodness, your article just disappeared on my phone. Do you
Oh,
have
I
it in
could.
front of you?
Yes, I got you.
Okay,
Of
go
course.
for it.
Vince Williams Jr., Memphis Grizzlies
Oh
guard slash
yes.
forward. Peyton Watson, Nuggets forward. Aaron Nesmith, wing for the Indiana Pacers. Max Strus, also a wing
Mm-hmm.
slash guard for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And RJ Barrett of the Toronto Raptors, forward.
Oh,
Yes. Man, that was the most fascinating choice. I was like, I don't know if I should put him on here. It's been 26 games. I have no idea how to. Maybe I don't know. Do you want to start with I just
I don't know how he could start with anyone except for Rowan. So why don't you do that?
So look, very two different seasons for RJ in Toronto and in New York. He started off the year really well in New York and then got migraines and then just wasn't the same after that for the Knicks. And then comes to Toronto, eats some home cooking, and is now playing the best basketball of his career. I cannot make sense of it, although I'll try to make sense of it for you guys here. I think one, he's off the ball more often. He's being used as a cutter more often. And so that's allowed him to, one, start running before he catches the ball, which is really important for a guy who is pretty ground bound. Like he's not like a jump out the gym type of athlete, but
Hmm.
if he gets a running start, he can outsize you and be that bully ball and like go through you, go to your chest, right? And that's just helped him be a great rim finisher. He's finishing like well beyond his career high at the rim, doing his best in terms of effective field goal percentage, 2 point percentage, all that stuff. His 3 point percentage is good too. He's not taking as many threes as he was in New York, but I think he's just maximized on what his strengths are. I think the Raptors have done a good job of maximizing what his strengths are and like doubling down on what they can be. That has also helped him become a little bit of a playmaker, making plays from those drives and like using that gravity that he creates, the rim pressure that he has to be able to like dump off passes or wrap around passes to the corner. We've seen a few of those, and that makes me, I'm still in the stage of, I guess, wonderment when it comes to RJ because it's still 26 games in to his Raptors tenure. And I know Knicks fans will always be like, just wait for that other shoe to drop. But I do think there's something different here in Toronto, and he's markedly changed like his shot diet. So yeah, I think that's why he's an improved player this year.
Can you please tell me, and I don't mean to immediately go to a negative here, but why is he shooting like 58% from the line as a Toronto
I
Raptor?
don't, dude, I
Because
wish
he
I
was
could
in
tell
the
you.
80s in New York. I mean, that was
Yeah.
really a cause for real
Yeah.
hope. And he's cashed in like he is playing better for the Raptors, but come
Yeah.
on, man, hit your
Dude,
freebies.
I have no idea, and this is something the Raptors in general have struggled with. They're 29th in free throw percentage, so it just
Oh
seems like
boy.
any player you bring to the Raptors, they will just immediately suck at free throws. Even Emmanuel Quickly, before he got to the Raptors, was an 87% shooter. He's now hitting 80% of his free throws. It's like what changed? I have no idea. Chuck, if I had the answers, I would tell you. I really don't know. And the other thing is, I've had this conversation on the little recaps I do. I don't know how to ask a player, "Hey, what's going on with your free throws?" Because like, what are they gonna say?
No,
What is
yeah.
they're not going to be like, oh, it's the angle, it's the dip, I got to work. No, they're just going to be like, I got to shoot it better. I got to focus on it
I'll
better.
be like in
And
practice, I'm hitting,
yeah,
90% in
exactly.
practice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they got the Noah board system, Noah analytics teaching them, the dip and the angle and everything and whatnot. And I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with RJ's free throws. It's perplexing. It's a million times perplexing. I can't even answer that question for you.
So you came on in the wake of the uh Anunoby trade. That's the
Yeah.
one we discussed because so that was the one we discussed. And we talked about RJ then. And my opinion on him then, which is my opinion on him now, is that he has been like a power forward that's just been 6'6" his whole career. That's where he should reside, both because I think he can beat bigger players either on closeouts or off the dribble if he has that more easily than he can, quicker footed guys.
Yeah.
Um, and because he's comfortable with contact, like he doesn't mind. Like in fact, he relishes it at the hoop, and he always would. Even in New York, even in that sort of system where he wasn't featured on the ball and he had to sort of fight for his scraps, um, he still would be among the league leaders in shots in the paint. It would be
Yeah.
like all-star wings and like RJ, and his
Yeah, and then
efficiency would be
the
much
worst
lower.
efficiency.
It's
Yeah.
so bad.
Yeah.
And so I like he was begging for a change of scenery, even though like he himself wasn't voicing that. But it was clear that Tibbs ball with Julius Randle as a teammate was just not going to be conducive to his growth. So I'm very happy that he has found a home and that he is finding ways to get easier money in Toronto. Um,
I think the
okay.
power forward thing is right, by the way. Like I would say he is pretty much a nominal power forward for this team right now. How much they lean into that when Scotty Barnes comes back and it's him, Jakob Pertl, and RJ Barrett, I don't know. But I think just like the bruiser barreling into the rim type of stuff has really been maximized in Toronto in a way that I don't think it was in New York, and
Yeah.
that's what's led to the improvement.
And I think he's better as a defender absorbing contact from strong players
Yeah,
than he is trying to, move his feet to keep up with really slippery guards off the dribble. I just
yeah,
think he's better guarding up than he is at guarding down. So,
yeah.
um, okay. So Strus, Nesmith, Watson, and Vince. Can we talk Vince real quick?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay. I'll give you the floor first. I love Vince. So, but go ahead.
I mean, for me with Vince, it's like, obviously he's a second year player,
Mm-hmm.
so obvious improvement, if you will. But also the leap from a guy who barely played, did not was even remotely in the rotation last year to obviously the Grizzlies have dealt with a number of injuries this year, um, has now been given more opportunity and is completely relished in it. I think it's a great improvement. Like going from a non NBA player or like a rookie, whatever you want to call it, to a rotation player, and now potentially like a really important part of the Grizzlies moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of the defensive versatility. He's more recently doing some more stuff on the ball, creating for others. I think that is very, very important for a team like the Grizzlies that is pressing up against the luxury tax and will need these type of guys to fill minutes for them, to play big minutes next to Jaw, next to Desmond Bain, next to Jaren Jackson Jr., because like he's like a utility knife that you can plug and play with those guys and can match really well in those lineups. You can just envision how he would look in those types of units, and like that's going to thrive. And obviously this year he's doing it on a team that is just like trying things, experimenting, and like go
Mm-hmm.
out there and do whatever you can.
To me, he is, in terms of his player profile, he's in the Suggs, White,
Yeah,
Herb kind of player, which, like I said, is just, it's invaluable to have that guy who can really defend point of attack. And he has the length to contest either in front or chasing from behind. Uh, he's a more creative passer than you would think. Uh, in his draft year, myself, draft pal Matt Powers, he's known as draft pal. He's one of the guys at Swish Theory, and his
yeah, yeah,
co-founder, Chip Jones, my guy. He's been on my podcast multiple times. We loved Vince, and we like not did not all make a concerted effort together to pump him up, but we all saw in him what is happening right now, and it makes me like very, very happy because
hell yeah,
they invested a lot in Zaire Williams, and Zaire's had injury problems, and like I certainly don't wish anything ill on Zaire. But
yeah,
Vince is a better player like right now. The whatever wing they've been looking for to go with Ja and Bain and Jaren Jackson, and I used to be Steven Adams, but whoever they're gonna have else in the front court, like Vince is that guy. He should start for the team next year. That should be his slot. And that's just a massive win to get that guy in the second round.
yeah,
Um, as far as Nesmith goes, I think it's a similar sort of deal where, you see this recurring theme of a lot of guys have improved a ton on defense to solidify their role in a rotation, and in Aaron's case, on a very, very good team. I think that he is a less talented point of attack defender than some of these other guys we've been discussing, including Vince.
Yeah.
But Aaron's motor is incredible. He plays so hard. And he is an extremely talented shooter. A more talented shooter than Jalen Suggs or Vince or Herb Jones. So for him to go from someone who got extended on like a very good deal, but was not guaranteed a starting spot at all. I mean, that was supposed to be Benedict Mathurin's
Right.
coming into this season. They play him because he's a two-way guy now. And whenever you watch him play, it's sort of similar to Suggs. If you just watch Nesmith when the Pacers play, you will see someone who is just always on the balls of his feet, just vibrating with energy, giving everything he's got on both ends, and can just play all day, which is a
Yeah.
real skill to have, even in a league where I think a lot of guys are underrated for how hard they play. He still sticks out among all of them. Do you have any other thoughts on Aaron?
I think it's a bit of feast or famine with the Pacers defense too. It's like when you need a guy who can defend at the point of attack and they just don't have like a lot of defenders
Yeah.
who can do he shines so much more because of that. So, I mean, I agree with all the points you made, but I think that's part of why that improvement is there. And then I guess I'm interested to hear what your perspective of a guy who was incredible as a shooter in college, if I remember correctly. And then
Nesmith?
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then he was like projected to be, especially with the Celtics, it was like, oh, this guy's gonna be plug and play, one of the best shooters, jump into the league, and then that didn't happen. And now in Indiana, it's like, okay, he's now a consistent spot up guy who can knock down shots and be this kind of 3-and-D, if you will, type of player. What
Yeah.
like what do you think happened there?
I think, first of all, he was a polarizing guy in draft circles in his year because he was a 2-year player at Vanderbilt. His freshman year, he shot like 33% on threes, nothing special. Everyone knew that he had like wing size, so he was someone to watch.
Yeah.
But his second year, he played like 50, I think 14 games, which in college is like non-conference. So Vanderbilt's an SEC team. He plays non-conference, which includes some cream puffs right before you get to SEC schedule. And in those 14 games, he was the best shooter in the country.
Right.
But in the draft world, small sample is such a everyone tenses up and does the little like porcupine thing when someone talks about small samples. No one ever wants to trust a small sample in
Right.
the draft community. And so he got a lot of people saying that that was an outlier and that he was not nearly as good a shooter as he was showing, even though in those 14 games he made over 50% of his threes, and in 14 games he made over 60 threes. Now,
Damn.
in draft terms, just to compare, Anthony Black, and he's not the most blessed shooter in the world, but in a full season at Arkansas last year, and Anthony goes 6th overall, he made 27 threes. Aaron made
Right.
16 before like Christmas, basically.
Right.
So that it just tells you how on fire he was. And he was used in Vanderbilt in a lot of pro sets, lots of off ball flare screen stuff. And like little escapes to the corner, like lots of design stuff Jerry Stackhouse ran to get him
Right.
pro style looking shots. Now he goes to Boston and his shot diet is not nearly as diverse. And it's a lot of you're our fifth starter, our fifth player, or not even a fifth starter because he didn't
Just
start,
like a fifth
but
guy. Yeah.
our fifth guy just sits in the corner and we just spam corner threes over and over and over again. And I think because he wasn't up to snuff yet defensively, he felt, and he was correct, in that like his minutes were not secure. Boston was good, and either your shot goes in and you stay on the court, or your shot doesn't go in and you don't play, which is
Right.
sort of what Quentin Grimes faced in New York before he got traded to Detroit this year.
Yeah.
So with that expectation and the fact that Boston couldn't really afford to gradually expand the kinds of touches that Nesmith got, I think his shooting was very sporadic, and then he couldn't build his confidence. He also wasn't really, because he wasn't encouraged to build up his off the dribble drive game. in Boston, it just didn't come around for him. And so use another great, because again, he's still 6'6" with a 6'11" wingspan who plays really hard. Great second draft candidate. And now in Indiana, there's no big clogging the paint. You always play 5 out in Indiana in a Rick Carlisle offense. He's a little bit more physically mature. The defense has come along. And so the drive game's a little bit easier for him. Now, he's still not an above the rim athlete. That block Anthony Edwards had to win that game was on an Aaron Nesmith drive. And it's had more to do with Anthony Aaron. But if you go back and look at that, Nesmith's not going up to cram that, he's going up to lay it up. But I think that all of the sort of confidence issues that were there in Boston are just gone now, because he's getting the right sorts of opportunities to round out his game. And he's just worked and worked and worked at the defense that he has the tools to execute. So in that Kuminga episode, the second half was sort of about Nesmith as another sort of wing who's really popping. So if anyone wants to hear anything else about that, Charlie Cummings is, the best at what he does. So I encourage y'all to check that out. But that's
Wonderful.
sort of that's the capsule on Aaron.
Wonderful answer, Mr. Chuck. Appreciate you. Thank you
man.
much.
It's whatever I can do to supplement the gold you're giving me.
Hey, this is why you get paid the big bucks, man.
That's right. That's right. So, all right, we got Max Strus and who's the last one here?
Peyton Watson.
Peyton Watson. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
With Strus, I think it's like, and by the way, I was split between him and Duncan Robinson, and it's funny that I was split between those two guys because obviously 2 Miami wings, if you will, and I think both guys have improved as playmakers. Both guys have improved with the ball in their hands. Both guys have improved in similar areas, so it was hard to pick. But I think Duncan's improvement was last year, and we saw that throughout the NBA playoffs. He played a massive role for Miami, and we really saw him just blossom, or like re-blossom back into the type of player that we had seen over the last few years, especially in that bubble run that they had. With Strus, we're seeing that a lot more this year than last season. And I think, the sets that the Cavs run with him and Mobley or him and Allen, the dribble handoff stuff, really some of the things that I envisioned they would do to make their offense a little bit more versatile, it's happened. Like they are leaning into that more often. And with some of their injuries, he's been asked to make more plays for them, and it's worked out well. And so the shooting has got to the point where it's back. He had a down year shooting last season, and I think the playmaking is expanded to the point where it's better. And I don't think he is an incredible defender by any means, but I think he's gotten to the point where he is no longer, bleeding points, if you will. I don't think he ever did really, but
no, I think he's a solid defender. Yeah.
Like he's always been like a solid team defender. I think it's to the point where like you can't really hunt him out, if that makes sense. And like you're not, that's probably part of it with Max Strus. Peyton Watson, sorry if you want.
No, go for it. Go for it.
With Watson, I just think it's like, the Nuggets so desperately needed one of their bench guys to pop in a major way, and Watson has as this just defensive monster point of like he can do a bunch of things defensively, but the weak side rim protection is something that's really incredible. Fuel some of their bench units. It's part of the reason the Nuggets can go to Aaron Gordon at the 5, because with those bench units, they can go Gordon and Watson. And it's like, you can have the shot blocking with Watson, and you can have the size and, kind of physicality with Aaron Gordon, and that kind of couples well. And Watson's just been awesome on the defensive end to watch. So that's the reason he gets on here.
Yeah. I think both very good selections. I think Max, you said it, but his 2-man stuff with Mobley and Allen is just excellent. And I think it speaks to how the Heat develop their players, because Bam is such a good safety valve in space all the time. And no matter what kind of a player you are, you look at who the Heat draft and who they play. They want players who are comfortable driving the ball. And if you're not comfortable driving the ball, they want you to get comfortable driving the ball. That's why Caleb Martin who he is on that team. It's why
Hame, right?
Jaime, same thing. It's why, Duncan has expanded his game in that direction. And that's for a lot of different reasons. You're going to get more foul calls if you're driving more to the hoop, obviously. I mean, that's sort of how Oklahoma City has formulated their team with similar sorts of guys.
Sure.
But also, Bam is one of their best two players, and Bam's going to be involved more if he's setting picks and rolling and finding himself in space. And you want to make sure you're involving your best players as much as you are. And I think Mobley and especially Allen is like such a good receiver on the other end of any screen in space, and is such a good decision maker that Strus has really set himself up for success.
Big
And that
time.
like that Miami skill set has translated beautifully for Cleveland. And so I love watching him do his thing. I love like that's some of my favorite part of watching the Cavs is that little stuff that he can do on the second side.
Yeah.
With Peyton, like incredible athlete, obviously, and especially coming from where he was in his draft year, which was as a freshman who like barely played at
Yeah.
UCLA. I mean, he was a big time high school recruit, but offensively, he was just so far away that it just shows, you know, the 1 millionth reason why Jokic is the best guy in the league and the best player to build around is stuff like this, is that you can draft a raw player, and because of what they've built there, how much they valued internal development and improvement, is that that guy can become ready a lot more quickly than he would in literally any other organization. I don't think Peyton Watson would be a 15-minute a night player. Maybe he's not 15 minutes a night in Denver, but like he would not have a consistent rotation spot on any other team. But he is
Absolutely.
there, and he might
Yeah.
help them win a title this year. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with you. I mean, that's a perk of having like the best player in the world, right?
Yeah.
And a guy who you can rely offensively on so much. It's just, yeah, cool. Kudos to him. Can I go through my honorable mentions real quick
Yeah,
and just like
please
rattle
do.
them
Please
off?
do.
Simone Fontecchio, Duncan Robinson, Nikhil Alexander Walker, Jabari Smith Jr., Devin Vassell, Io DeSumo, Nas Reed, whatever you want to say, Santi Aldama, Lou Dort, Dayron Sharp, Goga Bataze, Mo Wagner, whatever you want to say, Dante DiVincenzo, and Sam Merrill. That is the honorable mentions list. Guys who were considered probably have improved in their own right, but not as much or as tangibly, if you will, as some of these other guys. Dante DiVincenzo was a hard cut because he's been good. He's been good for New York.
He's the one. He and Nikhil are the two
Mm-hmm.
that really pop to me the most out of that list, which is an
Yeah.
excellent list. But yeah, DiVincenzo as an offensive player. I mean, he plays two ways too, but
Yeah.
like the how quick his trigger is on his three, how quick a decision maker he is just invaluable for New York. So yeah,
Yeah. I thought he would be very important for this team, but I did not think he would be this important and like putting up 30 balls on certain nights. And yeah, it's incredible to watch.
yeah, we'll see now. There's a I get a sneaking suspicion that I obviously want the best for Julius Randle. I want him to make the right decision on when to come back. I don't want him to risk anything, but I'm very excited to see this team
Mm-hmm.
with him still on the shelf with now Anunoby back. I
Right.
think there's a lot of obviously innate chemistry between Brunson, DiVincenzo, and Hart because, of course, there is, given their history together. I think OG being as we've talked about, being sort of the lineup trampoline that he
Yep.
is, just filling so many gaps. And I still think they have enough rebounding, without Randall between Precious and Hartenstein. So I want to see where they go, and I want to see what happened, like the challenge of reintegrating him, because
Yeah.
I think it is challenging. I think they can go on a little bit of a run here, but we'll see.
I would believe in that. I would believe in that. Apparently, they had an excellent game tonight in the OG return. So
Yes, they did. Yes, they
yeah.
did. Yeah, anything else you want to say before we wrap up here?
No,
Any other
man, no.
thoughts? Anything
I,
kicking
I
around?
let's just make this a real thing. Like, let's just make all improved teams. It would be cool. I think it would be cool to do. Not just because I concocted this list up, but because, guys deserve the love when they improve in their jobs.
I think three all defense teams, absolutely. I
Yes.
think three all improved, absolutely. And, I'm sure agents would be all for it because then they could say, my guy, look at these
Right.
accolades my guy made.
Yeah.
But if nothing else, I think if the media were forced to figure out all improved teams, the general understanding of the game would rise, in the
I
same
like that.
way. If there are it's just you have to dig deeper to sort of find your stuff. I hope that people have felt as though this episode has been a little bit insightful, but it just in talking about the different the different types and what really wins and what are common methods of improvement and what are uncommon methods of improvement. I
Sure.
just I think it's very cool, and I think the work you do is very cool. I'm glad that you follow these players as closely as you do and you hit on them in different ways over the course of a single season. So thank you so much for making me a part of it.
Appreciate it, man. Of course, no worries. Yeah, no, this was this was fun to do. Like, this was a lot of fun to talk about, and yeah, I mean, all improved is just it's what I love covering this aspect of hoops. I don't know, I don't even know what about it is, but I just like watching these guys get better. I can't. What am I supposed to say other than that? I don't know. I'm not sure, but yes, thank you, Chuck. I appreciate you.
The pleasure was all mine, S. Thank you all very much for listening. Check S out at Forbes. Where are you doing your recaps? Raptors Republic?
Yes, Raptors Republic. Yes. Yep.
Okay. Anywhere else that people can find your work coming out?
No, just follow on Twitter, do the things you guys usually do. I'm on there posting tweets and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, S. Thank you all very much for listening. This has been Chucking Darts. It's okay to be wrong about sports. Find your dartboard and start chucking. Thank you.